Thomas just signed a death warrant by running inside those walls before they locked for the night. We must return to the first day to see why. Our story begins as a panicked newcomer wakes up inside a dark, ascending elevator cage filled with supplies. The lift eventually reaches the top, where the roof opens, revealing a group of boys looking down at him. One of them jumps into the cage and welcomes the newcomer to his new home. Then the boys pull him out of the elevator and into a large, sunny clearing. Overwhelmed by the crowd, he runs away but quickly trips and falls in the grass. He stands up and sees massive stone walls completely surrounding the clearing, though their purpose is not yet clear. Later, a leader named Albie approaches the boy while he is held in a wooden pit. During their talk, the newcomer realizes he cannot remember his name or anything about his past life. Albie explains that the boys are self-sufficient, growing their own food and building every shelter. While they walk, he introduces a boy named Newt, who serves as second in command. From a high tower, the leader shows the newcomer the vast scale of the surrounding walls. He states the first two rules: do your part and never harm another boy. Finally, he delivers the most important rule: never go beyond the massive stone walls. Following the tour, a younger boy named Chuck is assigned to look after the newcomer. Two boys known as runners return from an opening in the wall as Chuck explains their role. During the explanation, he accidentally reveals that the structure surrounding them is a maze. As the newcomer moves toward the exit, another boy tackles him to prevent him from entering. Suddenly, a loud mechanical rumble begins as the massive stone doors start to move. The newcomer watches in shock as the giant doors of the maze slide shut for the night. Later that evening, a blond boy offers the newcomer a jar of a potent homemade beverage. A loud mechanical grinding sound echoes from within the maze, signaling that the environment is far more complex than it appears. While they drink, the blond boy points out the runners and their leader, Miho, who are gathered by the fire nearby. He explains that these runners spend every day mapping the shifting layout of the maze in a desperate search for an exit. However, the task is deadly, as he warns that no one has ever managed to survive a single night trapped inside those walls. This is due to the Grievers, terrifying creatures that dwell within the stone corridors and keep the boys from escaping. The tension of the night breaks when Gally challenges the newcomer to a wrestling match inside a sand circle. During the fight, the newcomer falls hard and experiences a sudden flash of memory that feels more significant than a simple dream. The jolt brings clarity, allowing him to finally announce to the cheering crowd that his name is Thomas. But the celebration is quickly interrupted by a terrifying mechanical screech from a griever echoing through the night. Later, Thomas experiences a fragmented dream of a laboratory where a mysterious woman claims that wicked is good. The vision is cut short when Albie wakes him at dawn to continue his introduction to the glade. As they walk across the field, the leader discusses the long history of the boys who have lived here before him. Following this, he shows Thomas a massive stone wall where the names of every glader have been carefully carved. Accepting his new life, the young man takes a knife and carves his own name into the record. Soon after, he asks Newt why they do not simply climb the walls to find a way out of the area. Newt explains that they have already tried every method, including using the elevator box, but nothing has ever worked. He insists the maze is the only exit and sends Thomas into the woods to begin working as a laborer. While searching for supplies, Thomas discovers a secluded graveyard filled with wooden markers and old skeletons. Suddenly, a boy named Ben appears from the trees looking pale and sickly, his heavy breathing suggesting something is very wrong. He suddenly attacks Thomas, pinning him to the ground and screaming that everything is his fault. Thomas manages to break free and sprints back toward the glade with Ben chasing close behind. The other gladers intervene to save him, and Newt subdues Ben with a shovel. Albie inspects the boy and discovers a large, pulsating wound caused by a griever's sting. He informs Thomas that Ben is undergoing the changing, a painful reaction to being stung. Thomas mentions that Ben claimed to have seen him before the glade, an impossible and troubling thought. The gladers gather at the maze entrance with long poles for a banishment ceremony. Miho leads a bound and terrified Ben to the center of the circle to face his punishment. The massive stone doors of the maze begin to close as the sun sets over the walls. They use their poles to force Ben into the closing maze despite his desperate pleas for mercy. The doors shut completely, sealing a fate that no one has ever survived before. Later, Gally uses a hammer and chisel to cross out Ben's name on the wall of names. Thomas has a fragmented dream of a lab and a girl saying wicked is good, hinting at a forgotten past. Newt explains that Albie entered the maze to retrace Ben's steps before the next sunset. He reveals that Albie was the first to arrive and spend a month alone in the glade. Through that experience, Albie realized that community is their most important asset for survival. While Newt works nearby, Thomas and Chuck observe the daily routine of the glade. The young man assists the other boys in clearing heavy debris around a tree. He asks Newt about the consequences if the runners do not return from their search. Newt insists they will return before the doors close, but his confidence seems forced. Gally and the gladers wait anxiously at the maze entrance as evening quickly approaches. Just then, the massive stone doors of the maze begin to rumble and close. Thomas suggests a rescue mission, but Newt explains that entering now is against the rules. The boys watch in tense silence as the gap narrows, fearing for those still inside. Suddenly, Thomas spots Miho and Albie approaching the entrance. Miho struggles to carry an unconscious Albie toward the closing stone doors. The gladers scream for them to run faster as the stone walls continue to slide shut. Panic erupts among the group as they realize the runners are not going to make it. In a split-second decision, Thomas sprints into the maze just before the doors seal shut. He recovers and looks back at the closed entrance, having left his old life behind. Miho tells him that entering the maze at night is a certain death sentence. While checking Albie's condition, he discovers a strange puncture wound on the man's chest. Miho explains that a griever stung him during their run. Soon after, a mechanical screech from a griever echoes through the dark maze corridors. Miho argues they must abandon their leader if they want to survive the shifting maze. As he speaks, the massive stone walls begin to shift and grind around them. However, Thomas convinces him to help move Albie to a safer spot instead. They drag their friend through the dark as the entire layout of the maze changes. Miho stops again and insists they cannot survive while carrying the unconscious man. But Thomas refuses to leave him and begins searching for a place to hide. Miho pins him against a wall, declaring that their situation is completely hopeless. Thomas notices thick ivy vines growing high up the stone walls, offering a potential solution. He begins hoisting Albie up using the sturdy plants, working quickly against the clock. Just then, a griever appears in the distance with its mechanical limbs clicking on stone. Terrified by the sound, Miho flees into the maze and leaves the others behind. Thomas frantically ties his friend into the ivy as the creature draws closer. He hides within the thick leaves just as the griever passes directly below him. The monster pauses there, searching for its prey with long, mechanical limbs. Thomas remains silent and still while watching the hunter from the dark shadows. But the griever detects him anyway and begins climbing the wall toward his position. So he drops to the ground and leads the creature away from the unconscious Albie. He sprints through the narrow maze corridors with the monster in close pursuit. The runner narrowly avoids the mechanical stingers during a high-speed chase through the dark. The griever corners him, but he manages to evade its initial attack just in time. Then he runs toward a section of the maze where the massive walls are closing. He baits the creature into the narrow corridor as the stone structure begins to shift. He dives through a narrowing gap just ahead of the heavy stone walls as the creature stays right behind him. He scrambles back to his feet and keeps running, the relentless monster never far behind. He races through the twisting corridors, searching for any way to turn the maze against his hunter. The griever surges after him through the dark passages, closing the gap with every stride. He sprints down a long corridor toward a section where the massive walls have begun to shift. He lures it after him into the narrow passage as the towering stone slabs begin to grind shut. He dives clear at the last second, and the closing walls crush the griever, finally ending the pursuit. At dawn, the gladers gather at the doors to wait and see if the runners survive the night. Newt tells Chuck that they are likely not coming back since no one has ever survived the maze. However, the group is stunned when Thomas and Miho emerge carrying the unconscious Albie. The atmosphere shifts as Miho reveals that Thomas did the impossible and actually killed a griever. Despite this, Gally argues at the council meeting that the rule breaker must be punished. Newt immediately defends his actions by pointing out that he saved the life of their leader. The room grows quiet as Miho admits that he fled while the newcomer stood his ground. So he proposes that Thomas should be appointed a runner, a choice that could change everything. Just then, a loud mechanical alarm sounds to signal the unexpected arrival of the supply box. The boys open the lift and are shocked to find a girl inside, the first to ever arrive. Newt finds a note in her hand stating she is the last one, suggesting a grim future. She briefly wakes and speaks the name of Thomas, raising questions about his forgotten past. Gally uses this strange arrival to argue that the presence of the new boy is causing trouble. Newt and Miho question him about a potential connection, but he claims not to know her. Soon after, Jeff informs the group that the box will not descend, threatening their survival. Determined to find answers, Thomas announces his plan to return and examine the dead griever. Miho asks Thomas if he intends to go back into the maze to dissect the creature alone. He agrees to accompany him instead, refusing to let the boy face the danger by himself. Thomas meets Miho and a small group of gladers in the woods to prepare for their mission. Then he leads the group as they run back into the maze to find the dead creature. The group arrives at the narrow passage where the griever was crushed by the shifting walls. They examine the mechanical and organic remains of the griever, noting its strange construction. Miho reaches into the carcass of the monster to retrieve a blinking mechanical component. Suddenly the leg of the creature twitches, and the boys jump back in alarm. Despite the scare, Miho pulls a pulsating, organic mechanical device from the remains. The group finds the device is labeled WCKD and features a blinking number 7. Thomas concludes the people who sent them to the glade also built these monsters. Gally demands he be punished for breaking the rules to preserve their community structure. Newt sentences the boy to a night in the pit without food as punishment for his actions. But following this, he officially promotes Thomas to the rank of runner. Later, Miho shows him a hidden, complete-scale model of the entire maze. The revelation feels heavier than expected when he admits he has found no way out. He describes the 8 maze sections and their predictable nightly shifting patterns. The two decide to investigate Section 7 together the following day. Just then, Chuck arrives to announce that the girl has finally regained consciousness. Thomas confronts the girl in the tower, but is immediately met with a knife. However, she soon lowers her guard and reveals her name is Teresa. He explains that everyone in the glade has lost their memories, including himself. Teresa recalls a woman saying wicked is good, a phrase that feels strangely familiar. Then Thomas admits he recognizes her from his own recurring dreams. Following this, she produces 2 vials of blue liquid she found in her pocket. He notices the wicked label, tying this mysterious substance directly to the grievers. The two bring the vials to Newt to discuss their possible purpose. Thomas argues they should use the serum since Albie is already dying. Newt agrees and gives him permission to proceed. He injects Albie, who wakes in a violent frenzy and attacks him. Teresa hits Albie with a blunt object to stop the struggle. Just then, Gally arrives to take Thomas away to face his punishment. As they walk through the night, he blames the newcomer for all the recent chaos. He specifically confronts the boy about the fact that Teresa knew his name. Finally, he locks Thomas inside the bamboo cage known as the pit. While there, Chuck explains his wood carving is for the parents he cannot remember. Thomas promises the younger boy that he will find a way out of the maze. Chuck hands over the figurine, asking him to deliver it if he manages to escape. But he returns the gift and promises they will all leave together. The massive maze doors open and Miho signals for Thomas to follow him. They sprint into the maze together to begin their investigation. Miho notes that Section 7 is open earlier than its usual schedule. They soon discover a blood-stained piece of clothing belonging to Ben. Just then, the mechanical device from the griever starts beeping with a blinking red light. Thomas realizes the device is acting as a compass and showing them a path. The light turns green as they reach a specific wall in the passage. A large mechanical door begins to open after reacting to the device. The shifting stone reveals a hidden passage that has never been seen before. They cautiously enter the area, unaware of what this discovery might trigger. While exploring, they find a red laser scanning the corridor. The maze begins a massive reconfiguration, forcing them to flee for their lives. They sprint through the shifting maze as the massive stone walls begin to close. The runners navigate a series of rapidly closing passages in a desperate race. They narrowly escape being crushed as the final set of walls slams shut. They return to the glade and announce the discovery of the new passage. But Gally argues that Thomas is leading them into a trap, sparking a heated confrontation. Teresa interrupts the argument to announce that Albie has finally regained consciousness. The group finds Albie in a state of deep emotional distress. The leader reveals he remembers Thomas from before the glade, making their connection feel heavier than expected. In a moment of despair, Albie tearfully asks why he came to the glade and caused this suffering. The survivors soon realize with horror that the massive doors are remaining open after sunset. Just then, all four maze entrances slide back simultaneously, leaving the entire glade defenseless. Thomas immediately orders everyone to prepare for an attack and begins barricading the council hall. As darkness falls, the first grievers emerge from the shadows and enter the camp. Panic erupts when a creature snatches a screaming boy from the cornfield and drags him away. Meanwhile, Gally watches in frozen terror from a lookout tower as the monsters swarm the area. A griever destroys a nearby shelter, but he manages to fight it off with fire. Following this, the surviving boys retreat into the hall and desperately secure the entrance. They wait in terrified silence while the mechanical beasts begin tearing through the wooden roof. Despite a desperate rescue attempt, a griever snatches Albie and disappears into the night. The survivors watch as their home burns to the ground. Gally punches him and blames the newcomer for the destruction and the loss of their leader. The young runner realizes he must regain his lost memories to understand their true situation. So he stabs himself with a severed stinger to trigger the transition and force his past to return. The resulting vision reveals that he and Teresa were originally observers for an organization called Wicked. He eventually wakes from his coma only to learn that Gally has taken control of the Gladers. During a tense meeting, he confesses that they were part of the team that built the maze. Newt encourages him to stop blaming himself and lead the group toward a final escape. However, Gally prepares to sacrifice the pair to the grievers as an offering for peace. Thomas and his allies launch a coordinated attack to free themselves and confront Gally before the sacrifice can be made. He then challenges the remaining Gladers to make a choice between staying in the glade or fighting for their freedom. Several of them decide to leave Gally behind and join the attempt to escape the maze once and for all. So the group of volunteers follows Thomas back into the labyrinth to find the final exit. He leads them deep into the shifting stone corridors where their fate remains uncertain. While they move, he gives Chuck the griever device for safekeeping. He rallies the group one last time to prepare for a fight where they must escape or die trying. The Gladers charge together at a griever blocking the final corridor. A brutal battle erupts as they use their spears to hold the creature back. The cost of their freedom is immediate as a griever snatches one of them away. Meanwhile, Teresa and Chuck sprint toward the exit door while the others hold the line. But more grievers emerge from the shadows to surround the remaining survivors. The pair eventually reaches the locked exit terminal but cannot get through. So Thomas and Miho form a defensive circle to protect the group from the closing monsters. Teresa calls out to Thomas for the maze section sequence to unlock the door. Miho shouts the code numbers over the roar of the fight while dodging a griever. Teresa enters the final digit, realizing this is the moment they have worked for since arriving. A massive door slams shut and crushes the grievers, finally ending the long nightmare of the glade. The survivors walk through a dark industrial tunnel, leaving the maze behind them at last. Soon after, the group finds a door with a green exit sign pointing toward the world outside. Thomas leads the group through the exit and into a ransacked laboratory filled with debris. They find the bodies of dead scientists near surveillance monitors, revealing a massacre that took place while they were inside the maze. Looking for answers, Thomas activates a video message from a woman named Dr. Ava Page. She explains that the world was destroyed by the sun and a virus, leaving humanity on the brink of extinction. Page reveals the Gladers were actually being tested for a cure, making their suffering part of a much larger plan. The recording ends with the doctor committing suicide, leaving the survivors with the grim reality of their purpose. Just then, a new door opens, but the group remains in shock at what they have learned. However, Gally suddenly enters the control room looking distressed and erratic. He drops a gun and warns the group they can never truly leave this place. As he begins to cry, he aims his weapon directly at Thomas. Miho throws a spear to stop him, but a shot is fired. The room goes quiet as Chuck collapses from a gunshot wound to the chest. He hands Thomas the wooden figurine before passing away, marking a devastating end to their journey together. Suddenly, armed men in tactical gear storm the room and seize the remaining survivors. The group is led outside and loaded into a helicopter waiting in the middle of a vast desert. As they take off, the massive scale of the maze is finally revealed from above. A man on board tells Thomas that everything is about to change. While they fly away, a very much alive Ava Page reports the success of the trials to a board. She announces the start of Phase 2, suggesting their ordeal is far from over.